All right, thank you so much everyone for joining. This is our first PatternFly community meeting. We started this meeting because we really saw an opportunity to hear more from our community members. And really, this is a great forum for pulling in discussion topics from our whole community. So it's really exciting to be here with you today and be thinking through the presentation. Are there discussion topics that are Patternfly related that you would like to surface in a future meeting or present on? This will really, today's agenda will really give you a flavor for a variety of the things that we'll cover. And then in the future, we have room to expand. So I'll go ahead and jump in. A little bit about our agenda. First, we're going to cover some announcements and what's new. I'm going to present that with Katie. And then for our topics, from the design standpoint, Matt's going to cover an update on what we've been working on lately. And I'll show you a couple of new features we have on the website that I think will be really helpful. And then Dana's going to cover experimental components and what that means for our greater community and our design system at large. And then Matt is going to dig into Toolbar Refactoring and the process that he just went through to build out Toolbar. And we'll be now building this on the React side, so it'll be great to hear a little bit more about the foundation he started around this Toolbar Refactoring. And finally, within our topics, Chrissy's going to cover the work we've been doing with Katakoda tutorials. So again, this is going to really cover a plethora of topics within our community, and just be thinking if you would like to potentially cover one in the future as well. And then I'll go into what's coming up. So what we're going to be working on next. And I'll show you where we're tracking that information so you can access that in the future if you would like. And finally, we'll have some Q&A. All right, so I'm going to share this default alert. Within what's new, because we're meeting on a monthly basis, I'll share on a monthly basis. Can you see me sharing alert right now on the website? Yep. Okay, great. Thanks. So we recently added this default alert. It's a variant that is a little bit more subdued than our other alerts. So it fits in a little bit more context than the very specified info alert, success alert, warning alert, or danger alert. So we recently introduced that. And then I'll let Katie cover our select enhancements.
Sure. Do you want me to share anything, or do you just want me to go over? I guess you've got the examples up there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, just talking it through sounds good.
Sure. So we've had a lot of work being done on the select this past month. We've had some various user feedback, a bunch of feature requests, and some input from interaction design as well. Probably the biggest bulk of the new features enhancements for select is the support for some more customization. We have the ability to allow user-defined options now, so you can actually customize the display of your options in the list, as well as what data they pass back on the events. Like if you select them, you can customize what you actually get back from the method. And we also now have the ability to add custom filtering for the type ahead variants.
Hi, sorry, Westford is leaving. There's banging construction, so don't get alarmed that we're all walking out. Sorry, thanks.
It happens. So yeah, what was I saying? So the custom filtering for the type ahead variants are now able to happen. So you can actually pass in your own function for type ahead. The default, it will filter by like a direct match alphabetically. So if you want to just match like any letters from a word, then you can actually write your own function and use that. And then for more visual features and some more flags, we've added a couple new ones. We've added the is disabled modifier. So if you want your whole select component to be disabled for whatever reason, maybe it's not done loading yet, you can actually toggle that. We've also added the is plain modifier. So this is a different styling for if you want a more lightweight look. It doesn't have the box that works the same. It's just a different look to it. And we've also added the direction property. This is when, say, you have your select at the bottom of the page, you can actually change it to expand upwards when you click that menu open. So you can now have it at the top or the bottom. And finally, we also added the is required property for accessibility. So now you can, in a form, say, like define if it's required or not. I think that about covers it.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. As a reminder for folks here, and maybe even an introduction for some, I'm referencing this documentation on patternfly.org/v4, and this was linked on our title slide as well as a few other places in the presentation. And this really will become or is now the place to go for your Patternfly for documentation. So I will give a little bit more of an update on the website here in a second, but I'll be referencing any documentation that's new in the future on our patternfly.org/v4 website. All right, and we're going to dig into some topics. So Matt, do you want to cover the design update?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, there's only two topics I wanted to cover today. These are kind of two fairly significant changes in design approach for Patternfly 4. The first one addresses a move from making our default navigation consistent with what we're calling the dark theme. So you'll see the screenshots here reflect both a list view and a dashboard view with the dark theme navigation on the left. So a little bit of history here. This is a decision as a resulted from extensive user research work. Kudos to Sarah Cesari for leading that work. And so the research really evaluated both user performance with comparing these two versions of the navigation, and also user preference for the light or dark navigation. Interestingly, the study showed that there's really no significant difference in performance of users using either of these UIs, but there was a significant preference difference for users to the dark navigation. We suspect that this is largely because the dark navigation does a better job of kind of isolating the navigation from the content of the screen, and there was a perceived difference in readability between the two. So given all that, we will still be supporting the light theme as an option, but we are going to be really encouraging people to use the dark theme as the default for Patternfly 4. Any questions on that? Okay, Rachel, you want to go to the next slide? Okay, the other thing I wanted to just talk about briefly, and this is work that's currently in progress, so it should be released soon into the library, but we are going to support an in-page as well as a modal wizard. Traditionally in Patternfly, we have supported a modal wizard as the primary wizard-like workflow. Modals have certain advantages for wizards, and it allows us to keep the user working within a modal task to either complete or cancel out of that task. But we've gotten a lot of feedback, and we've heard your feedback about needs to place wizards in page. So what we are doing is essentially keeping the same wizard design. You'll see from left to right, the layout of the wizard is essentially unchanged. So that wizard can be dropped into a page and total. And again, that's something that you should see being released into the Patternfly library very soon. Any questions on that? Okay, so if not, I'll hand it back to you, Rachel.
Great, thank you, Matt. All right, so for a quick update on the website, I wanted to show you all this Get in Touch page. It seems really simple, but has a fairly big impact to how accessible the internal team of PatternFly is, because it now lives on the top nav of our website. So to get in touch with us, we've listed 4 channels here, and I'll talk a little bit about each because I think they're all helpful in different ways. So we provided a link to our Slack, and with this Slack channel, really you can expect within a couple of days maximum, a response to your question. We're all on Slack answering questions, and it's a great way to start conversations. And also, I would say the same about the forum. So if you're looking to start a greater conversation with our community, we really encourage folks in the community to post on the forum, and our team is very active there as well. So let's say that after the presentation today, you have more follow-up questions. We will have a Q&A period at the end. I think we'll have plenty of time, but you could always continue this conversation on the forum and open a thread on any topic. And you could also search to see if the topic that you're interested in already has a conversation around it. And then we have our mailing list. So I would really encourage you to join the mailing list if you want to keep up to date on when our meetings are, or just be notified anytime I update the YouTube channel. We would also send out announcements here. You can expect to see those announcements on the mailing list and on the blog first, quickly followed by the forum. So those are all great channels to access our community and really to see the thought process by a lot of features we introduce. I would read more on our blog. There are some great blog posts that go into depth and reference the research for design or technical choices that have been made through the system in collaboration with our community. So that's a great place to read up on those topics, and that now lives in the Get in Touch page. And if you have any questions here, I would definitely let me know at the end of the meeting. And that's a good segue for the next thing I wanted to cover, which is making the switch from PatternFly.org to PatternFly, making the switch from PatternFly.org/v4 to PatternFly. So I think this slide illustrates it best, but what we'll be doing very soon is moving the PatternFly.org v4 site that I've been referencing several times today to PatternFly.org. And the reason we're doing this is because all of the latest and greatest documentation is living on PatternFly.org v4 for for the new effort for PatternFly, and so we will be keeping PatternFly.org current content, current site. It won't go anywhere. It's going to be living at PatternFly.org v3. So it's still and it's already at PatternFly.org v3. So that all of that content will still be there. The site will still be there. It will just be a place that you visit from our new PatternFly.org, which will be the current PatternFly.org v4. So all of that being said, it's a great time to start getting familiar with PatternFly.org v4, knowing that that switch is coming, and we'll be making it our default on PatternFly.org. And there are just a couple more features we want to wrap up before we make that switch. So that's in progress, and just to make you aware that that's coming. I'll stop there. All right, Dana, do you want to cover experimental components?
Sure. So you can hear me okay, right, Rachel?
Yes.
All right, cool. So something we've been talking a bit about, they're out in the wild now, but wanted to cover it briefly at the community meeting. So this idea of experimental components, something we've discussed in PatternFly for a little while. So how can we get something out for feedback without really feeling like it's done? So, and where we've been really averse to making breaking changes within the library more recently, we wanted to be able to try things out to get design feedback. Maybe we get it wrong. Maybe we need more feedback. Maybe people want to try things out. Or even with developers, sometimes they'll start using something and they say, well, the way you built this, we are struggling because our use cases are slightly different. So this gives us a chance to get a component out in use in the library and get some feedback on it. So what does this mean in practice? Let's take a look at the next slide. So we made a decision that developer would be making a choice to use experimental components. It's an opt-in model. So this means that it's not going to be part of the regular bundles. So for the CSS in patternfly.css, you won't see experimental component CSS bundled in there, but it will be included in the NPM package. So developer can choose to pull in that CSS if they're taking that path on their own. And the reason we did this part is we wanted it to be a real choice where someone says, well, I know I'm taking this a different way, so that that risk is known, that they're opting into it, not accidentally using something that is hardened. And then on the React side, you can see what an import statement looks like. And we wanted to call that out, that it would be very obvious when looking at the code that you're pulling it from an experimental location. So you can see it comes from React core, but then there's the DSM experimental to make it very obvious. And then when they move out of experimental, then it would just be from regular React core or be part of the full NPM package. All right, so on to our next view here. So then this is our design of where they would live on the website. You'll see a new experimental area. This is already live on the HTML side because we have a few that have already been released over there, along with an alert to note that it's experimental, an additional label under the about, so that it's very clear when you're looking at the documentation what you're looking at, and just some additional information about how to use those. So the documentation will be available as we're releasing these to make it very clear how they can be used and to get some feedback on these. And then we have one more slide. So showing what this looks like. There's a few already in there. On the HTML side, you can see a screenshot of just the navigation side of our website with divider and drawer. And there'll be more coming. Toolbar is coming there. Any new component we plan on introducing this way so that we can have a short cycle of feedback and working through it. And then we plan on moving these out of experimental to the regular sections. We plan on announcing these via Slack and the mailing list so that people are aware that we're looking for feedback, but we want to drive all feedback through the forum so we can get active conversation going and understand how people are using these and what sort of concerns or feelings you have about them. And then one warning, which is not a dire one, but just so that kind of just to communicate our thought process about the code. Normal semantic release breaking change logic does not apply to these. We want to be able to change the API, change how they look and feel without having to indicate that in the versioning. So normally if we change and delete a property or change the way something really interacts, we're going to bump the major version number of our library. But we want to be able to make quick changes, respond very quickly to community requests and not have to wait for months and months for a breaking change release. So we wanted to put these in a different section, which is really part of our drive toward doing this. And we will communicate changes in our release notes, which you can find in the root of our repos and also on patternfly.org to be able to easily see what's changing with each release. So that's it. Hopefully you'll find these useful and be able to give good feedback so that we can move them through our release cycle and promote them onto the regular releases pretty quickly. Thanks, Rachel.
Great, thank you, Dana. And Matt, would you like to cover Toolbar Refactor?
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. Right, so the toolbar refactor. Why did we decide to refactor the toolbar? Again, and the answer is we needed a simpler, more generic solution. We needed more flexibility, and we needed to improve the utility to support more use cases. as we saw in some early adopters like Insights specifically or cloud services, it was pretty clear that different applications were using the toolbar quite differently, right? And they were including some components, multiples of other components, elements inside the toolbar that we hadn't necessarily planned for in design. So we observed in the first version of the toolbar, which was actually a layout, it was flexible, but presentation was unorganized and kind of unpredictable. It didn't provide enough spacing support. Spacing was determined on whether items lived in a group or not on their own. And we needed more support for adjusting those spacers. So we had, I think a 24 pixel spacer and a 16 pixel spacer. And then what we observed in the second version was that it was presentationally very accurate, but it was also a bit fragile and very specific. And we needed to increase that flexibility. Next slide. I guess you're presenting. Right?
Yeah.
You're the next one? Okay. I think that's one too far. You're back one? Yeah. Okay. So in considering how to move forward with building this flexible system, we thought about using the flex layout, which would make sense because you have access to all of the spacer modifiers that you would need to build the toolbar in theory without some of the functionality, right, that you would have to build into the toolbar as a component. But that would essentially create a blueprint, and that would also place the onus of getting spacer values per specific element, like the group select or the bulk select, on the developers, and we didn't want to do that. It just is going to lead to inconsistencies in the future. So we decided to bake in the layout system, which emulates in a lot of ways the flex layout, but we took some of the breakpoints and some of the spacers that you can access globally out of the CSS, so that we could minimize that file size and be a little bit more efficient. So we included a base default layout system where we can define common elements like groups and items, and then provide modifiers to fill the gaps. Next slide, please. And so this is what it looks like structurally: items, groups within groups, and then items within groups, and they can all live right beside each other. And the second example is selected filters, which is where that enhanced functionality comes into the toolbar. That's an expanded content section, right? And then the third example here is the stacked toolbar content, which is basically taking, and then what was really cool about this when I was implementing it was I put a divider component in there, and it worked perfectly. It was really well done. So you can stack content on content on content on content. We don't advise that, of course, but you could. It has that flexibility. And then the expandable content section falls below all of those. Next slide, please. Right, so the system relies on a base CSS spacer variable. Both groups and items refer to that spacer, so that if you change the base spacer, it changes both the item and groups. But you can also change only the items or only the groups, and you have that flexibility. Next slide, please. And that spacer is 16 pixels. Right, so space items is a modifier that you can apply to the content or groups. And what that does is it spaces all of the items within. So on content, if you do that, all of your groups will be spaced at whatever modifier you choose to update, small, medium, large, or none, and at whatever breakpoint you choose to update those. And it affects all direct children. And then once you get into a new group, and create a new group inside that inside that group, those spacers are updated, they're reset to the default value. And breakpoint is optional. And spacers, PFM spacer applies only to the element to which you're applying. So it would, you can nest that inside of a space items modifier. So if you wanted item 2 in a group to have a large spacer, you would update that with spacer large. The breakpoint, again, is optional. And breakpoints are base, medium, large, XL, and 2XL. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so a list of modifiers, items that we've identified that need specific spacing. You'll notice that you don't see a PFM button on here because a button just has the default spacing. It's the most common thing that's going to appear in the toolbar. So we've identified bulk select, search filter, overflow menu, pagination, separator as items that we would be applying a modifier to. And then groups are filter group, icon button group, button group, and utilities are hidden, visible, align left to right. So that's if you've used or you're familiar with the Flex layout, this list is 50 times longer. So it's a pared down version of that functionality or that utility value that you would get with the Flex layout. Next slide, please. And the toggle bar or the toggle group is something specific to the toolbar in that. I'm just going to share my screen for this, but in that you can group selectors. Filters inside of the toggle group, and then you can choose at which breakpoint you want those to be revealed. So they would live in the expandable content until you have them revealed, and they obviously would appear in the content. So, yeah, and one of the cool things about this is that the default layout is a grid layout, and it handles all of it. The idea is that React is going to automate this process. So you flag the filters in the toggle group, and then they appear in expandable content. And we're working through that, and kind of a shout out to the experimental features. Like this is something that we're going to work through and make really functional, make sure that it's right. But that's what this does. You set a flag that says expand these on XL, and then you'll see the filters appear in the content on the XL breakpoint. It will no longer be an expandable content. I think that's it. Are there any questions? Nope. Okay, back to you, Rachel.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah, and we'll have the time at the end if you're noodling on this and you do come up with a couple of questions. All right, moving on to Katakoda. Christy, I'll pass it up to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. So we've been making a lot of progress on the Katakoda training scenarios front. So for those that don't know, Katakoda is an open source interactive learning and training platform for software developers. And there's actually quite a few Red Hat products that currently use Katakoda. PatternFly is the first team that's really using it for the front end side of training. So it's been really awesome. We've been connecting with the team at Katakoda about different features that we can implement. So that's been going really well. And currently the training scenarios are hosted on the Katakoda website. But the plan would be that we'd host them either on the PatternFly website or somewhere where people can easily access these scenarios. Next. And so far these are the training pathways we have. So we're breaking them down into core, React, and accessibility. We have 5 ones that are built out on the HTML, CSS side, 2 for React, and then we still have some coming for accessibility. And next. Rachel, sorry, do you want to go next? Yeah, thank you. So all of these scenarios that we have live at this GitHub repository. You can see the link here. And that's basically the way that you will be able to contribute to these scenarios. And Jen was able to help me write some guidelines for adding scenarios. So just so we can have consistency across all of these different scenarios. So it's to do with like different writing techniques, like whether we're bolding titles, the language we use, other different things we can use to help it a better experience for the users that are using Katakoda. And next, Rachel. And so the expected rollout date for this is October 1st. We're still fixing up a few things and we want to add some new scenarios. But I can take you guys through a quick walk of what we have so far. Rachel, do you want to hit that link?
Yeah, I think there's just the tiniest bit of lag. Okay,
Yeah.
we're in.
Awesome. Okay, so you'll see this page. This is where all of our training scenarios are hosted for PatternFly. We have a CSS and that pathway and then a React pathway. So Rachel, if you want to hit the CSS pathway. You'll see that we have these 5 different training modules that we've done. And Jen and I actually presented the overriding and extending variables scenario at DevConf the other week. So Rachel, if you want to click that. And we really encourage you, if anyone wants to try these out, we're taking feedback right now currently for these scenarios. So you can either create an issue under that training scenarios repository or speak to me or Dana directly. So basically, this is kind of how the layout's set out. You have information about the scenario, and then you can click the Start button. And then you'll see here we have the panel to the left basically gives you instructions on what you need for the to complete the step. And then you'll have different code that you can copy to the editor and different instructions. And then in the top right, you see you have your editor, you have your file tree, and basically you'll be able to see the files that you'll be editing in that step. And then in the frame on the right, that's the iframe, and that basically loads the code that you're editing. And you can see real live changes made there. So yeah, that's basically it. We're still working really hard on this. But yeah, we'd really love for anyone who has the time to check it out. We'd love some feedback on it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christy. All right, I'll take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about what's coming up. And I've linked out to our current milestone in progress. So just so you can get a sense of bearings of where this view is. This is our 2019.07 milestone. So let's say that I'm on the patternfly.react repo. I would click issues. I would go to milestones, and then I would click 2019.07. One thing that's really cool about this view too is you can see our past closed milestones as well. But no worries if that's one too many clicks. I totally get it. I'll continue linking to this milestone again and again through our future community meetings. And yeah, you can expect me to reference it frequently as we keep updated. So some things that we're going to be working on, kind of looking forward, is bringing in that work that Matt had been doing on the core side in our next repo on Toolbar Refactoring to React, so we can offer that to everyone in the React implementation. We'll also be working on a variety of enhancements that you can see here in components like Spinner, as well as like left align buttons on modal. So that's a change that we'll be making as well. And also just going ahead and wrapping up any bugs that we have our eyes on, as well as taking on a few patternfly.org issues or patternfly 3 issues that we want to wrap up as well. And here you can see issues that we've committed to, we want to fix in documentation. And again, taking in a variety of enhancements as well as those features. And then within any given milestone, we're always keeping our eyes on high priority bugs, so that's wrapped in as well. But this is a good place to wrap up because we can move into our Q&A section. And if you have any questions about what I showed or what any of our other presenters showed today, we have time to answer those. So I'll open it up to all of you. Any questions for our presenters today? Okay, great. Well, I've linked the forum in this slide. So if you do think of one later in the day, please go ahead and open a topic on the forum, and we love to hear more from you. This meeting is going to occur on a monthly basis, and we still have our demos on the calendar if you have interest in attending those as well. Those are also well attended. So thank you for coming, everyone, today, and I hope to see you next time. Stay tuned for that upcoming agenda. Thanks, and thank you to all of our presenters. Bye, everyone.